All right, let's get started. Thanks everyone again for being here. My name is Fernando Rivera. For those who don't know me, I'm managing partner of BuenTrip Ventures. We're a pre-seed fund based in Quito, Ecuador, and we leverage BuenTrip's position as a leading ecosystem builder in the region to identify, mentor, and invest in amazing founders that are transforming the region through technology. We've actually been around for almost 10 years now. This is our ninth year. So we didn't start out as a firm. We just started out with Felipe Chediak, who's here in the back, um, as two founders and entrepreneurs that wanted to give back and help the next generation of founders and entrepreneurs. I see a lot of Latinos here, so you guys know I'm not lying. The talent pool and the um, just the ability and the desire to start new things and grow companies in Latin America is unmatched. And we saw that, but we saw that there was basically three things missing for them to succeed, especially in smaller markets like Ecuador. Contactos, conocimiento, y capital. So networks, know-how, and capital. So that's what we set out to do. And I think time proved that we were right because we added those three things and things started to happen. So before we start, I'm gonna introduce our panelists shortly, but before we start, I just want to first of all, thank Endeavor for this beautiful setting, beautiful venue. Thanks, Endeavor. There's Flavia in the back. She's been amazing. I want to thank Pro Ecuador, and in particular, Juan Pablo Cuesta, Trade Commissioner of Ecuador in New York, for all his help and support. I also want to thank JTC Fund Admin Services for helping with the event. And last but not least, Karina Argudo and Susana Craig, two amazing Ecuadorian women in technology, one in New York and one in Silicon Valley. So thank you for all your support and help. Okay, so let's get started. I want to invite Deepak Chhugani, CEO of Nuvocargo, and Andrés Perez, CEO of AltScore, two of our portfolio company CEOs that are really transforming incredible large industries through technology. So to get started, I would just like for you to introduce yourselves, and your startups.
You guys hear me? If not, I speak very loudly anyway. So, my name is Deepak Chhugani. I was born in Kenya, raised in Ecuador, and my parents are Indian. That's why you have a Deepak here talking about Latam. Yeah, so my story, I grew up in Ecuador my whole life, came to the US for college in 2010, went into investment banking at B of A Merrill Lynch, covering Latin America. First year, then I got kicked out of the country, H-1B lottery for the immigrants who know how that is. I went to Mexico City with our bank, and I really quit because I had a few mentors that I met at probably an event like this one, who really encouraged me to get into the world of startups and entrepreneurship. So I came back to New York and tried to start companies. I had a first idea that didn't really go very far, but I got into YC and raised some money, and it kind of changed my life being in those communities. And then about 4 years ago, pivoted to what is now Nuvocargo, and Nuvocargo is basically a digital logistics platform modernizing the way that cargo freight, basically, either the finished products that you all have on your backs or the room you're sitting in, or the components upstream in the supply chain, how all that moves between the U.S. and Mexico. And we're basically vertically integrating and modernizing that very old school process that companies spend 40 to 50 billion a year on just moving goods between the U.S. and Mexico. We've raised about $75 million. We're about 150 people, We have 4 products. We're doing tens of millions in revenue. We've made a million mistakes, a ton of stupid things. I'm happy to talk about those. And we've learned some things along the way. And we're lucky to have Fernando and Felipe as one of the very first investors, actually invested in the idea prior to the pivot. And they were believers, even though they could have pulled their money out, they stayed in. So I'm hugely grateful to them. Yeah.
I'm sure they're grateful too now. But, I'm Andrés. I am the CEO and co-founder of AltScore. I'm also one of the portfolio companies of Fernando. I'm Ecuador. I was born in Ecuador. I also don't look Ecuadorians, I've been told, right? Yeah, but I was born in Ecuador. And I'm a mathematician and statistician. I've been always a very technical founder, I would say. I started an analytics and AI services company about 8 years ago, where we already met Fernando, and we didn't do it through the VC backed path, but I know there was an interest there to maybe like do something together in the future. And about 2.5 years ago, we started in AltScore. We started AltScore, and I had never done the path of raising capital. In fact, I was a bit, maybe, let's say old school, maybe is the word, I don't know, but of thinking, no, like I don't want to sell a bit of my company, like I want it all to be mine. Like they're gonna come and do bad things. And to be honest, it was like a very naive way of thinking, obviously, right? Like there's obviously a very, very positive things, and I have to thank early believers in people like us. Like you have an idea, you have an interest, but maybe you don't know exactly how that path can go. And Fernando, and we have others here also, like I want to give a shout out to Kamai Ventures here, Tony and Gabi. Fernando was one of our earliest investors and believers, right? And like right now you said the 3 things that you bring to the table, which is, of course you do it, and obviously the capital is like an oxygen, right, to make sure that this can grow. But I personally can tell you also, and I'm very thankful for you to you for this, and I've told you, it's that belief, right? Like someone like extending someone and saying, I believe in you, and like early stage investment in Latin America is not a common thing. I would say it's a bit of like a weird species, because typically it's early stage investor, but they ask for 5 years of cash flows and projection. You're like, well, maybe, like I'm at an earlier stage, like it's a bit of a 0 to 1 idea right now. And Fernando, I say it like very honestly, and I tell it to others, like there's few, especially in those less known markets, that actually do that. You're pioneering that, and we're extremely grateful also to have been part of that. And I should say, well, AltScore very quickly, we do lending as a service. We basically provide the technology and infrastructure so that any company can create digital lending products in Latin America. The data, the analytics, the underwriting, the onboarding, everything, so that you can launch digital credit products and hopefully help gap the lack of access to credit for SMEs in the region.
Thanks for that. But we're here to talk about you guys and how technology is transforming Latin America. So with that, Deepak, I'd like to turn to you. You already talked a little bit about digital freight forwarding. We can't open the news these days without hearing about nearshoring and the shift towards Mexico. But we all know that Mexico has been an important trade partner for the U.S. from the beginning. So why don't we dive a little bit deeper into that? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about the opportunity you saw, and it was before nearshoring, or when nearshoring meant something else, I guess. But tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing now and how that market is growing and how you're positioning Nuvocargo to win in that market.
Yeah. So for us, when we started in late 2019, I really felt like it was a really exciting time for Latin America, but also for trying to modernize kind of traditional older school industries. Me and my early team, we had a belief that a lot of the basic SaaS apps that are modernizing little bits and pieces of daily workflows for savvy technology consumers, they're definitely interesting and there's value there. But there's all these huge swaths of global GDP. Like global trade is 47% of global GDP. Logistics is 13% of global GDP. And a lot of the processes around logistics are very analog and offline. And I grew up around that. The reason my family ended up in Ecuador. As an Indian, there's like 5 Indians in Ecuador. I think 4 of them are my family. Is because of logistics, right? There was an opportunity to help with international trade in the late 90s, and despite it being such a big industry that fueled so many of the local businesses, so much of it is offline or online, but on email and in unstructured data. So that was kind of the insight. And my background, everything I had done was between the U.S. and Latin America. That's why we started focusing on Nuvocargo, and then after researching and early pivots, just realized U.S. Mexico is this absolutely gargantuan market. 9 million truckloads, $800 billion worth of goods, 50 billion in freight spend. There's just so much opportunity, and it's very, very old school, right? So we started focusing there, and that was the rationale. And then sometimes you get lucky as a founder. 2 years later, obviously Latin America was super exciting, freight got super exciting, and now everything around nearshoring, like we get called by reporters basically on a daily basis to talk about this. And it sounds like we picked the idea for that reason. We didn't, right? We had a feeling like you could definitely see that the overall trend is the U.S. is trying to diversify its dependence from China because of all the geopolitical tensions, and it's kind of the race to become the world superpower. And I think the pandemic was particularly unique because it accentuated all the weaknesses of relying on Asia for American companies for your supply chain. Freight prices skyrocketed, delays were huge. You couldn't open the news every day without seeing the huge backlog of ships in the port of Long Beach. So I think all of everything that happened in the pandemic basically accelerated this idea that we as the United States are vulnerable when we rely on most of our manufacturing to a country that we are competing with in a way, whether we like it or not, to be the world superpower, number one. Number two, supply chains that are so far away. Number three, where costs are starting to rise. China was always cheaper, no longer. Like now, really, you make goods in China, partially because of the cost, but also because of the goods and the skills. Like I think people don't understand how incredibly sophisticated the Chinese are at the tooling in iPhones, for example. That's not something you can bring to Mexico overnight. But there are many different things that can start making the shift over to supply chains closer to home. And there's like 6 other trends. One more I'll mention is the advent of consumers wanting delivery of their goods in 2 days faster. That means that you have to be able to go from factory to the house of your customer in less time, and that means your supply chains benefit from being closer to home in a cost competitive way, right? Moving goods from Mexico to the U.S. takes 5 days, a week, sometimes 2 days. From China, unless you pay air freight, which is super expensive, it takes a month at minimum, right? So all of these trends have created a really exciting trend, which is nearshoring, and I'm happy to talk about it more. But basically, it means companies are finding, how can I bring more of my supply chains closer to home? And Mexico is the massive beneficiary, in our opinion, right? So it's something we're very lucky to benefit from.
Thank you for that. And Andres, I know the pivot wasn't as big, but you also started with a different hypothesis of what the market needed. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you currently do now, but how you came to that opportunity?
Yeah. So based on our name, you can also tell, right? Like we started off being something completely focused on the data and the credit scoring side of what we do. Like our overarching philosophy with AltScore is that we want to help SMEs in Latin America access lending products and funding that they so desperately need, and that really the traditional financial sector has not been extremely good at covering that need, right? And there's a lot of figures that have been thrown around there, but it's estimated that $1.2 trillion are needed to cover the SME gap for lending in Latin America. So it's a huge problem, right? It's something that I think most people that have started their own companies have felt that even, right? Like it's something very, very, very common. And our first hypothesis was and also from my background, working with like data and all this stuff, we said we're going to provide data and credit scoring APIs so that larger banks and financial institutions can increase their underwriting capacities to approve like maybe less traditional borrowers, and also they reduce their default rates. That actually, it went well, like we started working with some important banks, but we noticed the trend, right? That is a hot topic that is happening, that is being heard around the world about embedded fintech, right? Maybe you've heard of this. It has different like shapes and forms, but one of them, right, is that, for example, and I'll tell about the specifics of our situation, right? Large corporations, for example, let's say a Coca-Cola, right? They notice that given the relationship that they have with like hundreds of thousands or millions of SMEs in Latin America, that they can become a source of capital or of providing financial products to these millions of SMEs that have not really been able to get these products through the traditional financial system. So being in this position, right, because they have better data, they know these companies for so many years, they have such an intrinsic relationship with them, right? They communicate with them every day. They realize that they can become the source of capital for them. So corporations such as this one started coming to us and saying, hey, we want to start providing lending products to our SME customers. But they're not traditionally financial companies, right? So they said, so we need your data and scores. So we said, well, if we give you just the data and scores, that's not enough, right? Like that's not just lending, right? Like there's this misconception that the lending problem is a scoring problem, and it's not, right? Scoring is just a small part of the lending problem. So all this to say that we evolved today to be what we call an end-to-end lending as a service company, right? Basically, we came to these corporations and said, you can come to AltScore and you can take care of the entire lending process, whether it's the digital onboarding, whether it's the underwriting, whether it's the loan management, the collections. Basically, it's an all-in-one platform to launch digital lending products end to end. And that pivot has been also amazing. You know, like we've been able to work with some of the largest corporations in Latin America, including Coca-Cola, some of their bottlers, and it's very positive also because something else we also realized was that, and maybe you've had the experience, I don't know if you've had small businesses in Latin America where you go out to ask for a loan for a bank, and depending on the country, it might take maybe 15 days to 60 days, tons of paperwork, like signing a million guarantors, like it doesn't make sense in 2023, right? So we noticed that even if you had the best underwriting algorithms and the best AI, still the user experience for the end borrower might still be terrible. And borrowers were actually telling us we might be even willing to pay a bit more in interest if the experience wasn't so bad and I got the money quicker. So all this to say, a long story, like we evolved to be this. Hopefully we become the rails for like a better lending in Latin America, right? Hopefully, yeah.
I'm betting on that, so. Yeah. I'll stay with you, since there's, in the audience, I think a lot of interest also in startups in general, some angel investors and other VCs. Why don't we go a little bit deeper into your the actual business model? Because you're a B2B, people hear infrastructure, hear fintech, they hear unbanked or underserved, and immediately you think of the B2C apps that promise that they'll lend to you. But tell us a little bit more about your B2B model.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an embedded B2B model, right, where we're going to this large corporations such as a Coca-Cola bottler, and the Coca-Cola bottler is selling, like their inventory, their Coca-Cola products into maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of like smaller stores, right? So basically what we do is we embed our lending infrastructure inside the applications or the sales process of these corporations, such that they can offer lending solutions to their end customers, right? So we are helping the less formal SMEs be able to access lending products that they need to improve their cash flow. It's not so that they can buy a larger television, or like, even because I think there's a negative side to like the overexposure to lending in the third world. This is really lending so that for a productive use, right? So that they can buy more of their inventory, so that they can have better financing terms, so that they can have access to the money that is coming to them in the future a bit quicker, right? That's a bit what we do. And the business model is basically a SaaS business model, right? Where these corporations pay us a SaaS fee so that they can use our technology. And for every loan that they book or that they originate, they're paying us a higher usage, right? And we have a take rate for the loans that they're booking. So that's a bit the business model.
And just staying with that, at some point you will probably run into the problem or the opportunity where multiple of your clients are going to want to lend to the same micro entrepreneur. And so there's like an opportunity for some sort of B2C app or something there to integrate everything, or can you comment across?
Yeah, so like once these, especially these corporations, are realizing, right? Like if I'm able to give them the lending so that they can access better inventory. Oh, maybe I can also give them lending so that they can, for a capex, so that they can like redesign their store. Oh, I can also give them consumer products and I can also give them insurance. So there is a large network effect because you start getting to know these clients so well. And then there's obviously the world opens up for all the stuff that you can offer them. That's one of the beauties of the embedded play, right? That you're there, that you know them, that you're connected, and that you can just like start serving them in a much more efficient way with even like B2C products, of course.
Yeah. Same question for you. I know you started as a digital freight forwarder, but you've obviously grown and diversified. Can you tell us a little bit about your current business model?
Yeah, so for those who don't know what a freight forwarder is, it's kind of the travel agent or the broker of the logistics world. So brands will come to us. We're lucky to work with some of the largest brands in both Mexico and the US, in all sorts of sectors: CPG, aerospace, automotive, tequila. Who doesn't love tequila? And basically, when the brands come to us, they have a supply chain that they've developed. So they have manufacturing facilities in Mexico, or vice versa. We do both. We do Mexico, US, US to Mexico. So I'm a US brand and I need to send my goods to Mexico, or vice versa. And they will have created a supply chain where they're moving those goods from the facility in Mexico, let's say Mexico City, to here in New York, as an example. And in that process, you typically need to hire 7 to 15 different companies to actually get the goods from point A to point B. You need to hire a broker in Mexico to find the truck at the right price, at the right equipment, the right verifications, etc. Then the truck picks it up, it gets to the border. I think people think you just pick one truck and it gets to the end. That's not how it works. Then you get to the border, let's say Laredo, Texas, you have to do something called transloading. You have to drop off the trailer of the truck in what's called the yard of the carrier. Then you have 3 or 4 entities that are helping you with the actual border crossing process, which are called customs brokers, which are kind of like lawyers that have unique certifications to file with the government. Hey, this is a truck of tequila, or this is a truck of furniture, and they're declaring that with the government to cross the goods and legally pass. And then you have another process on the US side, transloading, and then you find another truck in the US, right? And then all the while, if you have high value goods, you might need to have purchase insurance, because you want to make sure that if the goods are stolen, or if there's some risk that they're damaged because someone unloaded them incorrectly, you're covered for that. So there's really a plethora of problems that you have to solve. And what we found is that because of the uniqueness of our market, most customers break that up in a bunch of different players. And Nuvocargo is one of the few, if not the only player, who says, we'll take care of that end-to-end experience for you, right? And so that means that you work with one party who's actually thinking about transit times end-to-end, that your goods are in a good place. We're thinking about their budgets end-to-end, not just, is this rate competitive for Monterrey, Laredo? No, we're thinking they're going to pay $5,000 end-to-end. Does that make sense? Are their goods protected? And that creates a lot of benefits for our customers that would seem mundane, I think, to people in other more sophisticated technology sectors, but just having one single repository of reliable operational and financial data. You have one party that's accountable for the end-to-end. We have all this data like KYC on the trucking companies, the brands, so we understand the cross-border payment flows. Everyone in the supply chain also runs on net 30, net 60, net 90. So anyways, we've used that unique position to start layering on other products. We don't just help you transport the goods, we help you insure them if you need to. We help our trucking companies that when they deliver, we can get them paid faster. And then we are also a licensed customs broker, which is a license where you need to go through an FBI background check, and it took companies like Flexport 3 years to get. So we help our companies with that entire end-to-end experience, and it's the business model of all those companies separate, just combined in one. And then we actually believe that the software we've built to streamline all that will be monetized sometime next year as well, right?
Perfect. Thanks. Deepak, I'll stay with you. Nuvocargo recently announced their Series B, which I think puts you at around $250 million valuation. Was it 30? Much
36 and a half.
36 and a half raise. Obviously, you're continuing to invest for the future. You continue to see growth in this space. Can you tell us a little bit about your plans of what you plan to invest in the near future?
Yeah, I don't know if this is controversial to say, but one of the things that we've learned is that too much money can also be bad. So we were lucky that we were able to raise a lot of capital. We raised 75 million. We have, roughly half or more of that on the balance sheet. And really what we did over the course of the last year is really start reducing our burn rate and try to really focus on fundamentals for the company. So I think we're lucky to have enough money to invest in the things that we want, but one of the biggest things is we want to develop the muscle, and I think we have already, but of really capital efficient growth, and I think that we've succeeded at that. That's been a difficult pivot to make in the craziness of 2021, pivoting to where we are now. So we're lucky to have the funds. Where are we already investing funds? I guess that's why I make the distinction. We're not going to invest more necessarily unless we see unique opportunities. We're already investing in our software platform is called Nuvocargo. We believe it's the only transportation management system designed for the intricacies of U.S.-Mexico trade, which is a very large market, and everyone else kind of does domestic TMSs for the U.S. market. In Mexico, it's much more immature. So we think that's really unique and is going to be more important with the trends that we discussed. Number two, we're investing in growth, growth, marketing, product development, and that's basically it. Like we have 4 products, so it's a lot of investment that we need to balance out. But I think that this platform that we've built is allowing us to, in a more seamless way, become a multi-product company, and that's been a big investment of this year, right?
Awesome. Andres, you're not currently raising. You've also been very capital efficient, but you're planning a raise next year for your Series A. What opportunities are you seeing? Where would you like to invest that capital?
Yeah. So first of all, congrats. that's as you know, the market is not easy. So like hats off. Yeah, for sure. And so yeah, we're planning on racing in about 3 to 6 months from now, depending a bit on certain metrics that we wanna hit. The biggest thing that we are seeing is, like since we work with these corporations like Coca-Cola or Grupo Arco or some of the largest CPGs, they're multi-country, right? Like so right now we started off in Ecuador, but now our headquarters are in Mexico, which is the market that we're after right now. But we are getting pulled in a very positive way, and we're in Argentina. Hopefully, is going to be a home of us in the near future. Brazil as well, Colombia. We're getting like this pull from our clients of saying, hey, can you start helping me in these other countries, which is a very positive thing. That obviously requires some investment, some like to make sure that you do it properly, especially when you're talking about lending and like sensitive matters, right? That you have to do well to actually be able to service other countries. That I would say is the main thing, which obviously comes with also tons of like developers investing in the product, like that sort of thing.
Perfect, thanks. And just a final question for both of you, outside a little bit of your own scope, if you're talking to budding entrepreneurs, well, we have the thesis that Latin America is transforming very rapidly, and that the next wave of digital companies, digital giants, are going to come from the B2B sort of infrastructure plays, software and services that are required to digitize the region. Where else do you see opportunities? Like, what would you tell a budding entrepreneur today? Whoever wants to take it.
I honestly would say it's pretty difficult right now to pick something, in my opinion. Maybe that's a pessimistic view. I've done a bunch of angel investments, and I'm seeing a lot of companies, including we're a YC company. We went to see the Winter 23 batch, and we saw every time OpenAI launched something, everyone was pivoting in the batch, and then even some of the companies that I've backed recently, they seem to change quite often. Obviously, everyone's excited about AI. But I personally don't think AI is just something you invest in. I think it needs to be tied to something defensible and something that adds value to customers. And so the simplest advice I would give is to do something like what we did, which is pick an outrageously old school industry where you think software can add value, and try to put yourself in the value chain in a way that customers understand, and modernize a lot of the processes. It's difficult, especially in old school industries. It's not the most attractive to founders that are typically excited about startups and able to raise venture capital. There's a huge culture clash, but I do think that's where a lot of opportunities lie, because in the more sexy spaces, you just see that every vertical has a lot of competition. Everyone, they see the new GPT updates and they launch very similar things, and a lot of the innovations seem to be getting commoditized from my perspective. So I think something where you can take a lot of old school processes turn them into structured data, and then you're in a unique position to apply software, technology, AI in ways that others can't. That's the one we're betting on and we're excited about. But outside of that, I really don't know. I think the world is moving so fast. It seems hard to keep up right now.
Yeah, it is. It's tough to like give a recommendation right now. Just adding on to like, I agree with what Deepak said. I would say also, like very on the AI side of things, like I also see people that think, oh, it's the matter of getting a new feature, something new that in a couple of days, like it gets crushed because something else comes out. I would recommend, like besides getting into like an industry that is not that sexy, B2B, like there's really a lot to be done there, right? Like, and also work a lot on the distribution, right? Like that's something that I tell people that are trying to do something with AI. Probably your moat in the next 5-7 years not going to be something necessarily revolutionary with the underlying technology, but rather like solving like obsessively the problem of some customer type. The more narrow, the better, and get the best distribution that you can. I wish I got that advice when I was younger. I was.
Very good.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, good. Yeah, I agree. So yeah, that's something I think it's important to know. Like when I was younger and I was like, I'm gonna do something cool because I like it, and then I'm gonna see who buys it, and that's not how it works. Like it's a bit the other way around. Focus on that. Focus like obsessively on the problem, on the distribution. Those are probably gonna be the ones that survive this AI wave that I think is still yet to come. I'm not as like some friends of mine tell me the world's ending tomorrow. I don't think so yet, but I would say to be also on the specifics. If you're thinking anything with fintech, which is stuff I can talk to, technology on the debt collection side of things, on like helping with so much bad debt that has been like produced in Latin America. That's a big space. Like there's been tons being focused on like KYC and underwriting and like getting more and more originations, but people have forgotten about the back end of lending a lot. And I would also say in general, just like business lending, like when you think about like KYC or like underwriting or like a new technology, it has been very, very focused and too concentrated, in my opinion, on the B2C side of things. When you look at SME lending, even in the US, like I think there's so much still to be revolutionized, let alone with Latin America. So those are my 2 cents, but also do something that you like, right? That's also, yeah, you have to like it, right? Or else, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that. I think I'll open the floor for questions. If there's anybody who would like to ask our panelists a question.
So I agree. Oh, do we have a question here? Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I was wondering what you think about the venture ecosystem in Latin America. Is it still nascent? Because it's one of the last frontiers, like Latin America, Africa, and parts of Asia. And also your thoughts on exits. For example, Nuvocargo. What is the probable exit, IPO, or being bought, or you want to stay just on your own? Yeah, maybe you can give us an overview of the ecosystem.
I'll start off with the easy part, the ecosystem. You'll talk about the exit. Good luck with that. Yeah. It's very nascent. Yeah, it's very nascent, and it's crazy. Like when we met in 2014, it was like nothing. It's crazy how quickly it's like evolved, and like it. If you think about it, like even 5-6 years ago, there was nothing really. It was like so. Yeah, it's extremely it's evolving very rapidly. I know you don't want to make it about you, but I have to give like the big like recognition to people like Fernando that BuenTrip is doing something that is going to revolutionize the region. That's not a hyperbole. It's true. Like people that are actually saying, hey, let's invest in technology. Latin America and I know Africa as well. Like this region, where typically you're not thinking about I'm going to create new technology or like think in terms of like innovation. Having these types of like pioneers that are investing in the region and like giving the early seeds, like such this will be able to get the fruits of this in many years from now. It's not immediate, but these are the key moments that are gonna like define a whole like generation of entrepreneurship, of like changing even the economic structures of countries, right? Like I tell the people in my company, we're not producing oil or selling bananas or exporting this. And not to like minimize that, but we're exporting technology, and that's pretty amazing. You know, like I don't think politicians will change a region. I think it's actually other changes that will need to happen, and not to be and it's an ecosystem of many players working together, but having folks that bring capital and like give it to early believers and dreamers, like that's pretty amazing, Fernando. So keep on doing it. We have a big responsibility, because if we do well, you'll be able to do it more for others. That's something that motivates me. And the exit, please.
Just to piggyback, I'll take the exit one. Don't worry. Obviously for me, I was really shocked, and I'll tell you an anecdote. Being very frank, as someone who grew up in Latin America, and then I got into startups. I came to New York. I didn't really think of doing startups in Latin America because it felt very nascent just a few years ago, right? So a funny story is Nuvocargo is a Mexico-U.S. company, and obviously as part of fundraising, you position the company in whatever way gets the investors excited, whatever trend. Now we're a nearshoring company. Last year we were what I mean? Like they're always excited about some trend of the day, and it was really hilarious to me that in 2021. It was more exciting to be a Latin American company than a U.S. company, because they wanted something that was a new frontier, that was less competitive, and now it's reverted, right? Like all the tourists have left, if that's what people say, right? And I could say, like, one of our rounds was Tiger sending me a term sheet with like a very short call, like all the stuff you read about. So we got to live all the craziness, and then you're seeing the bust now. And I think it's going back to what a lot of Latin American entrepreneurs have known, which is it's a region that most of global capital, and I think Africa is the same, is going to associate with difficulty because of the political situation, the currencies, less exits, less developed capital markets, but also a lot of opportunity. And I think it's going to be harder. Like there's less exits. One of our investors, David Perez from Nubank, like that's an outcome that would rival any of the outcomes here in the US, but there's one of those. And then dLocal and Meli, there's like a handful, right? Versus maybe dozens or hundreds in the US. So that's a fact, and you have to know that. But I think at the end of the day, if you build a good business, which means it produces cash flows, you're going to get, maybe some discount because you're in Latin America, maybe not, depending on when you go out. I think at the end of the day, if you build a good cash flowing business and you have a story that resonates of why you're solving big problems for customers, the Latin America question just becomes, what multiple do I trade at if it's a good business, right? And so for us, we really think about it that way, where we're kind of a unique hybrid where we are a Mexican company, but 80% of our target customers are in the US. A lot of our comparables are US publicly traded companies. So I think we have less of the concern around what do we do for an exit. You have private equity super active, IPOs are really active for logistics companies doing what we do. So we just go back to that. That's been the hardest and biggest learning over the past 18 months. Entrepreneurs, including us, right, like got excited about the revenue multiples and the this and the that. I think if you look at Apple to Facebook to any of these companies, they end up being worth 10 to 30 times their earnings. So if you produce a big cash generating machine, it's going to trade somewhere in between, and you can find good exits. I think the hard part is if you're banking on someone just continuing to fund your losses forever, you're not going to find good exits, right?
So I heard NASDAQ IPO there.
Yeah, it's coming. You'll ring the bell with me. Yeah.
All right. Any more questions? Yes, Faye.
I have a question for Deepak. So your company is end-to-end logistics service, which I find very intriguing. So my question is more on the backstory of the growth story of your company. If I were to break it down into three parts, the first is, how did you first get started? It's very difficult to piece together this entire end-to-end process. And the second is, as you scale, how do you optimize the roads? So as I imagine, there are different pieces, and maybe different pieces, you have different vendors. How do you select them?
How do you optimize what, sorry?
How do you optimize the entire end-to-end logistic process? So for each piece, do you select different vendors? What are the metrics you look at? And how do you get them to work together? And the final piece is, as you look to the future, as you look to grow your company, and apparently your company become an important part of the ecosystem, how do you see your role in contributing to to the ecosystem, both to vendors, to clients, to really help not only the growth of your company, but the entire ecosystem. And finally, you mentioned about, you made a lot of
You're gonna have to
mistakes.
remind me of these questions.
I'm curious, what's the biggest mistakes that you have made?
Okay, so the first one is how we started. I think this is one of the beauties of at least Y Combinator for me. I think was a huge influence in terms of taking an idea and actually getting started and not getting stuck in like analysis paralysis. So I had already done another idea for 18 months or 15 months, whatever. It wasn't really working as a big venture scale business, but we learned how to go from an idea and really just starting, picking a KPI that represents success of your business or customer demand, and then just relentlessly focusing on moving that KPI literally week over week with that level of intensity. And then eventually you run into these roadblocks where I can't grow this week over week if I don't build this piece of the product, automate this workflow, try these new marketing ideas. And that became my ethos as well. But however, to your point, freight forwarding is a really difficult business. I know people say low barriers to entry in freight, but it's actually very difficult for customers to trust you with their products and for you to build relationships greenfield with trucking companies. It is a B2B marketplace, so it's really difficult. So this is where I think entrepreneurs need to be creative, right? I think I picked the idea in February or March 2019, and right around then, again, I had YC, pivoted, some money in the bank, offered money back. Most people stayed, including these guys. And I still remember, I went to a conference in Vegas. I was 26 with YC, and I'm like, hey, I want to solve some freight problems. And people found it memorable. And one guy there said, unless you're not like a Ponzi schemer, this story is really interesting. And I want to connect you with a friend who has a freight forwarder in Mexico. So I flew down there, was able to ran this whole company. And by the end of the trip, 2 days, he said, I want to sell you the company in exchange for stock in the company. So we went overnight to having licenses, a little bit of revenue. And that was like one of those creative hacks that I don't know what book you could read to get that. But in month 2, we had revenue, we had licenses that took Flexport years to get, and I had someone I could just shadow every day and understand what the process is like. And then we just picked the KPI and we tried to move it every month. And sometimes that meant hiring a salesperson because I sounded like a complete idiot in sales meetings who didn't know anything about freight. And sometimes it meant redoing our website or going to a conference or not dealing with the demand side, dealing with the supply side or the operations, building more products. So it was just like that, and not overthinking it and being committed to trying to grow a certain KPI that's truly representative of the health of your business. I forgot all the other 6 questions. What was the second one?
How do you optimize the entire end-to-end?
Yeah. So like I said, I think it's kind of connected with what I just said, which is as you start growing the network and growing the certain KPIs, you kind of focus on what's the most pressing problem or the biggest blocker, right? So maybe at first we would get customers saying, I want to work with you, but I need you to meet these prices. And we had very bad prices because we didn't have a network. So then we picked, a certain geography, a certain region, tried to build relationships with certain trucking companies, or they would say, I'll work with you, but I need better tracking. So we would work with our CTO and our product and engineering team to create visualized tracking experience, and so on and so forth. And I would just say, really, even till today, the more you're trying to reach different levels of scale, you have different problems to solve, but the more people, the bigger scale you want to hit, it's a more complex problem with a lot of moving pieces, right? What was the third one?
Biggest mistake.
Biggest mistake. Wow. I don't know if there's like one biggest mistake. There were a couple of key hires where I didn't do references, and that blew up in my face later on with like investor diligence. Because that happened to me after that, like I can't hire anyone unless I do like 14 references. Maybe I'm obsessively overkilling on the other side, but that was a big learning for me. You can learn a lot about speaking, especially for key hires, speaking with former colleagues, employees, and don't settle for the 3 names they give you. Do back channel, develop a network. Like now, if someone sends me a LinkedIn, there's many times that I'll already have texted 3 people that know them or the CEO of the company they worked at, just to find out what the impression of that person was, because it can just save you. When we had this like hyper hiring period, 30 to like 200 people, you just waste so much time if you interview, and then at the end you do references and you realize they're not very good because their reputation will speak for them. So I think references was a massive mistake I made that I've now kind of obsessively overcorrected, right?
Thank you. My name is Anthony, and my question is kind of for all three of you in a way. What is your view on Ecuador and Quito becoming a larger capital hub over the next 10, 20 years? As you guys have been doing it for about a decade, and it's obviously grown large enough to be holding conferences like this and have these two wonderful, successful companies here. How does the future look?
I'll take that one. So let's see. Let's start with something everybody says, but it's actually true. Talent is better distributed than opportunity. I think that's the one thing that a lot of us that invest in the region recognize. And so for us, we started, it was a lot of just talk by politicians. But I actually knew that Quito had, and Ecuador in general, had a history of technological innovation. Very few people know, but like even today, a lot of ATMs still have embedded software in it that was coded in Ecuador. And the first digital banks in Latin America, before we had a name for startups, were in the 70s and the 80s in Ecuador. Fully digitized back offices of banks. So as an Ecuadorian entrepreneur in technology, and a student of who came before me, I knew of this history. So I knew that the potential was there, and that it's a matter of basically focusing on the founders. So without knowing Felipe and I and Carmen, who's not here by the way because she just gave birth, but we knew that by just being obsessively focused on the founders and just doing whatever they needed from us, that the talent was there, that that they would solve the problems themselves. I think that's what's been part of our success, because most interventions, government interventions, are very top down. So it's like, oh, there's no venture capital in Ecuador, so let's bring venture capitalists to Ecuador, and nothing happens. Let's bring all these innovation experts with their master's degrees in Sweden, and nothing happens. And it's just a ragtag group of entrepreneurs like ourselves were able to move the needle basically by just talking to people like them and saying, well, what do you need? How can I help you? So unknowingly, we basically redid what Techstars and Foundry Group had done in Boulder, and we rediscovered the Boulder thesis. So we can call it the Quito thesis. So long-winded answer just to say that we're very excited about the future. If you had told me in 2014 when we first started that in 2019 or 2020 we're going to be able, no, 2021 we're going to be able to launch an accelerator program and actually have a selection problem with just Ecuadorian founders, I would have told you that you were crazy. And now we're running the first B2B software accelerator online for the whole region, and we have over 200 applicants per year from everywhere from the States to Patagonia, to Argentina. And so we can select the best ones, and I think it's what Ecuador is good for. Ecuador is a good testing ground. It's a good laboratory. You test it there, and then you take it outside. It's a small market, and but it's very similar to the rest of Latin America. Plus, it has the dollar, so a good advantage there. So we're basically doing the same thing that we tell our founders in Ecuador to do: like start here, start small, find product market fit, and then scale. So I think, yeah, I think the future is great for Ecuador and for a bunch of other smaller markets in the region.
Adding quickly, there is a resilience, right, to like Latin American founders. They say resilience is like the number one quality you have, and if you're not resilient in Latam, you're done, right? Like it's crisis all the time, it's problems all the time. So it's a very unique place to find like founders that are willing to like put the extra mile, and I also believe like that in certain specific countries in Latin America, like you hear this, right, about like large investors, that certain countries get more points, like when they're doing the evaluation, some markets get more points, others get less. I like to be the underdog, so I saw that as like a motivation. But the fact is, there's also an economic situation that happens there, that since it's so overlooked, it's a low hanging fruit problem, right? Like you're gonna have the easy pickings for the best, right? When you start off, it's a greener field, and that's how it feels over there, right? In other markets, it's gonna be a lot more competitive, maybe like even inefficient to some points. In markets like that, like it's the sky's the limit, right? Because it hasn't even really started yet, right?
All right. With that, I think let's call it a. Well, one more question. Yes, from one of our sponsors. That's it.
Okay, I'm Marceli Meri, director of JTC. With the experience that you have today, if you could go back in time, what would you guys have done differently to improve the chances of being successful and scaling your business faster, and maybe raising capital earlier so you could grow your business even more than what you have accomplished nowadays?
I'll start quickly. There's a pet peeve of mine, because it's Andrés point of 20. I think it's off. Hello. Okay, so like if today's version could speak, and you know this one pretty well, one conversation would have saved me maybe like, I'm not kidding, like 6 figures in lawyer fees and like setup fees, and like, like one conversation. I tell people who are starting up, like just call me for 15 minutes and like it'll save you a lot of money, and how to set up the structure and all the nuances, how to do it. The cap table, right? Also, like, oh my God, you should do a clean cap table from day one. And the one I said before, right? Like the obsession of the distribution and the customer and the problem, right? Instead of like the solution. That was a big one. I'm technical. I like to build stuff, like I'll come up with an algorithm in a basement and say, this is so amazing, someone will buy it. That's not how life works. And what you said is actually exactly what you did, Fernando. You focused what I came to mind is that you focused on the customer and the problem, right? The entrepreneurs instead of the solution, which is the very common thing in Latin America. So that's a big one I would have changed.
I have a lot, so it's difficult. I think one of the things that we actually got right that helped us avoid a lot of mistakes I've seen a lot of other founders make is finding a community. I think that's something BuenTrip provides. They helped me, YC helped me. A lot of the things like best practices of things that startups go through, whether it's how to set up your payroll, how to set up the cap table. So I think it's really important to find those networks and that content, because it can save you a lot of heartache and pain. So I definitely echo that. I think sometimes it goes underlooked, but that can create a lot of pain for founders. One, and this is hard because it's maybe revisionist history, because now we're in this stage where it's Series B. But one thing that I find myself spending a lot of time on now is this concept that used to be very fluffy for me, which is business strategy, if that makes sense. I used to think like that's an MBA thing, like I'm an early stage founder, I'm just going to go and hustle and move the metrics every day. And I think there's value to that mindset. But I do think it's a balance where, maybe the pure MBA students that are just spending all their time in a room planning and not executing, but then people that just execute, like those are two extremes that are not the best. I think finding a middle ground is really important. And what I mean by that is there's so many founders that, like Andrés said, just go and build, and then they realize, if I would have interviewed 5 experts in the field or 6 people that tried the same idea, I could have learned things that saved me time. And I'm taking that, I think, to another level, which is, can you articulate very crisply what you stand for in the market in relation to your competitors, what that solves for customers. I don't even know if I can describe it here, but this concept of having like a simple business strategy that everyone from your board all the way to the the junior rep on your team can articulate. This is what we stand for. This is our value proposition. That's something I'm spending a lot of time on now, and I'm sure we've lost a year or two because I was like a 20-something founder who didn't know what the hell any of that meant, and it sounded like corporate jargon to me. And now I'm realizing it's very important, right?
Hi, I'm Liliana. Are you also serving Canadian companies that are looking to import from Mexico because they usually have similar challenges than U.S. companies? And another question is, what is your number one complaint that you have from your current clients, and what are you doing about it? What are you doing about it?
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay, cool. Yes, we do serve. We actually don't serve Canadian companies directly. Well, in a way we do. We serve Mexico or US customers that do North America cross-border freight. The main focus is US Mexico, but there's a lot of customers who, when they give us the US Mexico freight and they see that we can deal with the cross-border, the border of US Mexico really, really well, efficiently with data, then they ask us, can you also take these shipments that go all the way up to Canada, because the US Canada border is much easier. So yes, we move freight into Canada. We don't directly target Canadian customers unless they're importing from Mexico or exporting to Mexico, right? And then the second one, look, logistics is a very intense, operationally intense business. And I don't mean that in like we need assets, or it's actually kind of communications intense. So if you can imagine, like we're moving tens of thousands of shipments, just imagine how many of those per day, and each of those has to be there on time, has to meet certain performance metrics and SLAs. So the biggest complaint that can compound is just, why is this truck delayed? I don't know what's going on. And so all of the software and the product roadmap that we build is to create deeper and deeper granularity on every step of the puzzle so that we can solve that problem for our customers. We already do, we believe, better than anyone else in the market. Like no one even measures border crossing times or what are the different steps to optimize for that border crossing experience. Because like I said, they don't focus on the end-to-end, they focus on a little piece. But there's still going to be challenges with visibility. The truck in Mexico is in a region where there's no GPS and they want to know where it is. Like these are the types of problems that I think, because of what we've built, as technology gets better, as satellite coverage gets better, as GPS gets better, as API integrations with GPS providers get better, we can serve those things to customers to help them with what are pain points for everyone in the industry, not just us, right?
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. We still have a lot of wine and beer and food outside. So, let's go back towards the entrance and continue to.
Tell us a little bit about the.
I know. I had a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second fund. Where are we, Fernando?
Can I invest?
Anybody from the
Oh,
SEC?
yes.
All right. Well, to summarize, before we go, and I'm starving, so that's why I'm pushing it. Well, you guys are meeting two of our star performers in our first portfolio. We raised a small prototype fund in 2021 because we were sure that we had basically built this incredible deal sourcing engine without really realizing. We then realized I left ETF.com and launched a prototype fund together with Carmen. We're now raising our second fund. It's a $20 million fund. We really want to own the pre-seed B2B software space. We're product people. We're entrepreneurs. We love to collaborate with other founder-led, entrepreneur, operator-led VCs like Kamai Ventures here in the room. Because I think it's a handful of us in Latin America that have that operator background. And so we're very, very at ease with pre-seed investing. Like Deepak said, we invested in his previous company. He pivoted. That's fine for us. I think we were pre-product with Andrés. So that's where we feel at ease, and that's where we want to continue playing. We do run an accelerator program, like I said. We do it yearly with the anti-YC. We don't want to do 300 a year or 2 or 3 cohorts a year. We just do one cohort, 5 to 10, and get really deep into trying to build the beginnings of product market fit. Yes, Diana.
Hi, I don't need the microphone. But you're starting this new fund, and you have 2 stars, obviously really successful entrepreneurs. How will you choose your new entrepreneurs? What makes you different, and what are you going to do to make sure you choose the best entrepreneurs?
Well, that's a great question. I would say a lot of our process is very similar to other VCs. We're not reinventing the wheel. We love, well, first, a match with our thesis. Like I said, for Fund 2, we're really focused on this infrastructure and services layer, software layer that's going to underpin rapid digital transformation. So that's the first thing. We love really big, boring markets. So we try to, that's what usually takes us towards B2B software as opposed to the latest trend in B2C, whatever. The ability to build product, the ability to attract key hires at the beginning is very important. But I would say our biggest differentiator is we actually track and measure BuenTripness. For us, BuenTripness is, like we used to say at the beginning, we invest in givers, not takers. We see this as a long-term partnership. So we want to be invested with people that we enjoy picking up the phone and talking to. That we know that as they grow, they will become the next mentors in this community. So basically, from systems thinking, I think we think that in emerging markets, it's important to add more into the system than you take out. Because otherwise, if you take out more than you put in, then the system doesn't grow. And so that's why it's important for us. And we actually, you guys are lucky we did it. We hadn't instituted this yet when we first invested in you, but now our very last step of the process is it's actually our longest interview process is the soft aspects of, you as a person, and are you a giver or a taker? So yeah, I think I hope that answers your question. Go for it.
I'm soft spoken, so maybe this. Yeah, I was wondering if you could give us some insights on, or your thoughts on consolidation in Latin America, the state of consolidation. Like someone could have a fund thesis that says, okay, I want to invest in companies merge, and sometimes let's say your company, even yours, could invest in for equity, not so much like putting money. And like logistics, it's quite a big industry. So you could find another logistic company in Ecuador, which is a small market, 17 million people. In Colombia or Argentina, a little bit big, but they'll be doing different things. And the same thing for Inez, which could be, you want to expand to Argentina, Colombia, or like Dominican Republic. Could you give us what's going on in that?
Yeah.
And whether we're not yet there?
I think it just depends on your. So I come from an M&A background, and we're actually looking at acquisition targets now. This is something we're thinking about a lot. I can tell you we've been very fortunate to speak with a lot of entrepreneurs that have done M&A, either selling their company or buying companies. And what you hear from most of them is it's really hard to make it work well for a number of different reasons, right? Culture mixes, strategically doesn't make sense. In the software world, actually integrating software stacks, I think, is much harder than buying a client base or something else. So I think my answer is kind of a very giant, it depends. In our world of logistics, I think that it's a very well-known play, like private equity firms do it all the time, where there's a platform company that's built something unique, special software, a different way to process, let's say in our case, shipments, a better customer experience, more efficiently through technology, and then acquisitions can be a way to expand to different areas, different industries, acquire client bases, new products. I think that's better than acquiring just for geographic expansion, because I think geographic expansion is quite difficult. But if you're in a small market, I think that's a very clever way to do it. For us, we could grow 100x and we'd still be like 1% of our market. So it's just really, really big. So in our case, we would use M&A as a tool to get more penetration in our market, not to expand geographically. But my short answer is I think it's super difficult to make work. So if you're going to do it, you have to be super thoughtful about culture, integration, paying the right price so that it's accretive. A lot of things that private equity firms do every day. We've interviewed a bunch just to understand where does it typically go wrong, right? But I think there's a lot of opportunity for that if you're thoughtful and not just buying willy-nilly, buying revenue, right?
Nothing valuable to add.
Awesome. Right answer at the PC.
Yeah.
All right.
I have a question. What is Fernando eating for dinner?
All right. Well, thanks a lot again. Join me in the kitchen, please.